Welcome to the 19th ToKini Andy Kanji lesson. Today we're going to cover the meaning, building blocks, writing, historical evolution where applicable, and a story to memorize each of the following kanji. We'll also learn the parts and radicals needed for those kanji. Today, there are 2 new parts. And stick around to the end of the lesson where we'll be doing a quick quiz to help everything stick. By the way, check the pinned comment below this video to see why we are not learning readings for each kanji just yet. Let's get into it. I hope you had your morning coffee or tea and are feeling alive today, because the first kanji we're going to cover means life. And honestly, it can also mean alive, so puns are live. The official radical for life is, unsurprisingly, life. But we can break it down into no lying down and dirt or soil. There are 5 strokes in life, and they aren't quite what you'd expect from the parts. In fact, they're similar to the next part we're going to learn. If you find this order confusing, it may be a good idea to change the parts that we've chosen to no radical, dirt, and a 1. As that is closer to the correct stroke order. Or you may want to make our next part one of this kanji's parts. It's up to you, really. But we start with no lying down. Then draw the vertical stroke in dirt, which is usually the second stroke in dirt. We then draw the next smaller horizontal line through the vertical staff and finish it off with the final stroke on the bottom, which should be the longest of them all. Originally, this was actually a pictograph of a plant or tree sprouting up out of the ground, which is another meaning of this kanji. Birth, life, sprouting, all of these were expressed by this pictograph. For our first story today, we're going with no lying down on the grave coming out of the dirt, which is covered in living vines and plants which have grown up out of the ground. Remember that it's a good idea to pause the video after each story and really try to imagine it, or to create a story of your own that will help you remember the kanji even better. Make sure the story contains the meaning and every single part in some way. Though our first part for today is not a full-on radical, it is an officially recognized common part. It's just a building block that doesn't add any particular meaning to the kanji that it's in. In Japanese dictionaries, it's listed as blue's crown because it's one of the main parts in the kanji for blue. So we're going to stick with that name. Blue's crown, not to be confused with Blue's Clues. Hey, long time no speak. Aliens. We're gonna get sued? I have to delete that reference? Fine. Okay, guys, that reference is definitely deleted. You have no memory of it happening. This is just a part and not a radical, so it has no radical. But it can be broken down into dirt or soil and 1. There are 4 strokes in Blue's crown. Because of the way they're ordered, we can consider the first 2 strokes to be the ones in dirt. Horizontal stroke on top, followed by the vertical staff stroke. We then draw a shorter 1 through the middle, and finish it off with the longest horizontal stroke at the base. Remember though, this is usually going to be a crown part, so all of that needs to be scrunched up at the top of the box you use to write kanji in. I couldn't find any useful history on this part beyond the fact that it's made from dirt and 1, and it's called Blue's crown, despite it showing up as a crown in quite a few other kanji. I guess blue's the most popular one. So on to the story we go. A fluorescent worm placed above the gravestone in the dirt shines a blue light like a crown of blue. Speaking of a blue crown, here's blue. The official radical of blue is itself. I'm blue, abba-dee, abba-die, abba-dee, abba-da. Cut. The parts are quite clearly blue's crown and a moon. There are 8 strokes in blue. We start with the horizontal stroke on top, followed by the vertical shaft stroke. We then draw the shorter horizontal stroke through the middle and finish it off with the longest horizontal stroke at the base. Remember to keep this scrunched up at the top of the kanji. We then draw moon down below, vertical stroke, followed by a stroke very similar to the 6th stroke in gate. Finally, we add the final 2 strokes within the moon. Historically, this kanji was built from the first kanji we learned today, life. Originally, that was used to indicate blue's reading at the time, and the kanji for a water well was on the bottom instead of moon. Some sources state that both those parts were used to indicate readings, while others suggest that both indicated meaning, with well referencing a type of blue dye pulled from wells, and life indicating the color of young plants. By the way, this kanji is used for colors we call blue and some types of green in English. Now when you hear someone call a green traffic light blue, you won't be so confused, I hope. Anyway, the kanji was eventually simplified to be blue's crown on top of yen, and more recently was further simplified to have a moon on the bottom, though I'm not sure if that is any simpler than yen. For our story, we'll say, the blue crown reflects a blue light off the moon. Instead of the sun, I guess. This reminds me of that old net anime, Red versus Blue, for some reason. Probably because this next kanji means red. I think they still might be making that anime series now, but it doesn't really matter because the official radical of red is red, not blue. Which do you prefer, red or blue? Let us know in the comments. Technically, we can break red down into dirt or soil and fire. That bottom part might not look like fire, but technically, when it's connected to the bottom of a kanji and not just floating down below it, it can look like what we have here, for some reason. There are 7 strokes in red. We start with the first 3 strokes in dirt, horizontal, vertical, and longer horizontal line below. Be sure to keep this part in the upper half of the kanji. We then connect what looks like a no stroke to the bottom of dirt, just left of center. Next is a stroke that looks like a feathered broomstick part. Make sure to sweep that up at the bottom. We then draw 2 dots, first the one on the left, and then the one on the right. You could be forgiven for wanting to break this down into no, feathered broomstick, and 8, but we're not going to do that here. Historically, this was made from the parts big and fire, making it an ideograph for red, the color of big fires. Of course, big was a pictograph of a person, so these look a lot like a person who was lit on fire, which could also indicate red, I suppose. Anyway, this is technically why the parts are not what we indicated, dirt and fire, and red is instead its own radical nowadays. But for memorization purposes, the parts we chose will suffice, I think. For our memorization story, we'll go with the fire beneath the dirt is big and red. I guess hell or something? Please share any stories you made for the kanji in this video down in the comments. It might help someone who our stories did not help. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about this kanji, which means before. And before you strangle me for punning too much, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps. Occupy your hands so that they don't come after me. The official radical of before is person's legs, which clearly stand out on the bottom of the kanji there. Get it? Stand? I'll show myself out. We can break it down further into a no radical, dirt, and person's legs though. There are 6 strokes in before. Before moving on to the official radical of person's legs, my power knows no bounds. Anyway, before moving on to the official radical of person's legs, we first draw the no stroke and immediately connect it to the first horizontal stroke in dirt. It's then vertical and longer horizontal stroke. Finally, we connect the person's legs beneath the dirt. The historical version of this kanji started out looking like a dancing Groot-like image. It then turns into a weird creature with squiggly legs and straight arms, or a squiggly-legged person balancing a trident on their head. Then they jumped shark during the Ming Dynasty with a maze or something. In reality, this was a combination of the kanji for foot on top and person on the bottom. The meaning was derived from the fact that the front of the foot, i.e. toes, are considered the front point of a person, which is another meaning for this kanji. Front, not toes. For our memorization story, we'll say, No stands by the grave in the dirt for sexy legs, thinking about the times before. Like, just before. They buried those legs quickly. Often this kanji is used for just before, so I wanted to mention this. Although, it's also used in words like last week and last month, so I guess these legs could have been buried for quite a while. Subscribe so that you're the first to know when we start covering words for each of these kanji, so that what I'm talking about makes a little more sense. On we go. What would be the title of an 80s movie about cliff jumping? Probably Cliff Radical. This radical means cliff. Cliff radical. You get it. Since this is not really a kanji, but just one of the official radicals, it has no official radical of its own. And it's clearly its only part. There are two strokes in cliff radical. We start with the top horizontal stroke, and then sweep down from the left of the cliff, curving out to the left a bit. Historically, this has always been a pictograph of a cliff. So our story will be too. The image of a cliff. Creative, I know. Speaking of cliffs, if you're ever near one, watch out for rolling stones. Rolling stones. This kanji means stone, and its official radical is also stone, though there is a reason we taught cliff before it. Technically, cliff is a part of this kanji, along with mouth. It may work better for some of you, though, to instead use one and a no radical as parts, so that you don't forget that the second stroke in cliff radical is in a bit of a weird spot. We start this kanji off with the first horizontal stroke on top, and then draw the no-like stroke starting just left of center. We then draw the mouth below that whole enclosure. Historically, this was a cliff radical and mouth. The mouth part, though, was apparently a pictograph of a large stone below or rolling down the cliff, which happens to be the story I made for this kanji as well, despite buying the dictionary I found this explanation in after writing the story. Again. I've already given it away, but our story for this one is pictograph of a stone that has come loose from the cliff and rolled down it. Which brings us to the Lesson 19 quiz. In this section of the video, I'll show you a flashcard with the English meaning for a kanji. Pause the video when we show each card and try to remember how to write that kanji. Next, write it on your hand with your finger or on a piece of paper. Then press play and see if you were right. The best way to remember kanji you just learned is to search your memory for the story we taught you, or the one you made based on the English word on the flashcard. Our first card is red. Next is blue. Just a few more. Here's life. And then there's before. finally, we have stone. Let us know how many you got right down in the comments. Red versus blue. Life before the stones. I can just imagine the Halo characters singing, I can't get no satisfaction. Don't mind me. You can learn the next 5 kanji by clicking here, if the video is already out. If you don't want to wait, you can continue learning with our level 1 kanji flashcard deck for ANKI on ToKiniAndy.com. We're also releasing kanji series videos early for all the members there, so check it out if you want a head start.